On the third day after losing my memory in a car accident, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The caller's tone was cold. "We're already divorced. Stop pulling these little stunts. It's embarrassing." Immediately afterward, a childish voice chimed in. "I hate you. I want Aunt Eli to be my mommy instead." Completely baffled, I replied, "Congratulations. I hope your dad remarries soon." Later, the butler called in the middle of the night, sounding helpless. He said the young master was throwing a tantrum and insisting on finding his mother. But the person who answered the phone was Dr. Mickey. "She's asleep." The person on the other end quickly took the phone. His voice sounded as though he was suppressing his anger. "Thank you for taking care of her during this time. I'll come pick her up right now." Mickey interlaced his fingers with mine, lowered his head, and kissed away the tears on my eyelashes. Then he let out a soft chuckle. "There's no need. She cried pretty hard just now." It took me quite a while to calm her down. Chapter 1. When I opened my eyes, all I could see was white. My head felt as though it had been struck by a drill, the pain piercing straight into my skull. As I lifted my head, I saw cold medication dripping from the forebag. No wonder I felt chilled all over. "You're awake. Is there anywhere you're still feeling uncomfortable?" A deep, cool voice sounded beside me. It seemed vaguely familiar. I shifted my gaze, following the attending physician's long, well-defined fingers upward until I saw a refined and strikingly handsome face. I froze for a moment. "Mickey, didn't you already get on the plane?" Mickey was my direct senior in graduate school. In the muddled mess of my memories, I clearly remembered seeing him off at the airport not long ago. And then, my head throbbed violently. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't remember what happened afterward. Why was I in a hospital? I glanced at Mickey guiltily. "Don't tell me I got into an accident on my way home and made you miss your flight?" Hearing that, Mickey, who was writing in my medical chart while wearing a white coat, suddenly paused. He bent down and leaned closer to me, a slight frown forming between his brows. The clean scent of detergent that always seemed to belong to him washed over me, making my cheeks grow warm. After observing me for a moment, Mickey turned to the nurse nearby. "Could you ask Dr. Noah from psychiatry to come over? The patient suffered a brain injury and appears to have developed selective amnesia." The brief examination soon ended. I learned that Mickey had already completed his doctorate and returned to the country 2 years ago. As for me, I had lost my memory in a car accident and forgotten the past 6 years of my life. Mickey and Dr. Noah stood outside the ward discussing my condition. Clutching the corner of my blanket, I stared through the crack in the door at Mickey's side profile, which seemed almost radiant. The current Mickey was indeed even more mature and attractive than the one in my memories. Just then, a nurse entered holding a phone. "Miss Jenna, there's a call for you." I took the phone. Only a string of numbers appeared on the screen, with no contact name attached. The moment I answered, a cold voice came from the other side. "We're already divorced. Stop pulling these little tricks. It's embarrassing. And quit being so dramatic. Elise and I are busy signing a project in Paris right now. We don't have time to deal with you." Immediately afterward, a childish voice sounded again. "Humph. I hate you. I want Aunt Eli to be my mommy." Huh? The words made no sense at all. I was completely confused. Who were this father and son? The whole thing was utterly bizarre. Perplexed, I said, "Congratulations. I hope your dad remarries soon." The person on the other end seemed stunned by my response. His voice immediately rose. "You." At that moment, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Mickey saying goodbye to Dr. Noah and turning toward my hospital room. My breathing hitched. No longer interested in dealing with the strange caller, I mercilessly hung up. Looking at Mickey's handsome face, I flashed him a flattering smile. Then I asked the question I cared about most. "Mickey, are you single right now?" 6 years ago, I had a crush on Mickey. Unfortunately, fate had not been on my side. But now, 6 years later, such a perfect opportunity was right in front of me. Surely I wasn't going to let it slip away again. Chapter 2. Oh my, that young master of the Song family, Eder, is really heartless. They were married for years. But the moment his dream girl returned to the country, he immediately dumped his wife and rushed through the divorce procedures. The nurses gathered together, gossiping animatedly. They glanced toward the hospital room and shook their heads with sighs. She's hopelessly devoted too. She knew all along that young Master Song had someone else in his heart. Yet she still stayed by his side and endured years of mistreatment from the Song family. Not only does young Master Song dislike her, but I've heard even the son she gave birth to is against her. He's always yelling at her to get lost. And now this car accident. They say it was an accident, but who knows whether it was really caused by despair after losing all hope. One of the younger nurses cracked sunflower seeds and chimed in with a grin. The Song family is filthy rich, so what if she wasn't loved after marrying into the family? After the divorce, the settlement alone would guarantee her a luxurious life for the rest of her days. If it were me, I'd gladly take that deal. My floor was almost empty, and after waiting in my room for quite a while without anyone coming to replace it, I pushed my floor stand out into the hallway. The moment I reached the corner, I heard the nurses gossiping enthusiastically. I absolutely loved gossip. Standing by the wall, I listened so intently that I found myself sighing right along with them. Who was this young master of the Song family? What an absolute jerk. And that son was just like his father, a completely ungrateful brat. When I heard the younger nurse's teasing remark, I nodded vigorously in agreement. Exactly. If you got a massive divorce settlement, you could just think of it as getting paid for putting up with two idiotic employers. That former Mrs. Song absolutely shouldn't do anything reckless. Just as I was completely immersed in the gossip, sympathizing with the woman as though I were living her story myself, a cold voice suddenly sounded from directly behind me. Jenna. I had no idea how long Mickey had been standing there, looking down at me from above. His pale eyes swept over me. His tone was unhurried, carrying a trace of sarcasm. Instead of resting properly in your room, you're squatting here listening to gossip? Get up, go back. The moment I realized it was Mickey, I was so embarrassed that I wished the floor would open up and swallow me whole. With my head lowered obediently, I endured his scolding before reluctantly getting to my feet and shuffling back toward my room. Looking over my shoulder every few steps, Mickey cast me a cool glance before walking toward the nurse's station. I saw him speak to the nurses with a stern expression. Within moments, they scattered in all directions like frightened birds. A little while later, the young nurse pushed a medication cart into my room to replace my floor. She had apparently been lectured by Mickey personally. Even behind her mask, she looked utterly dejected. Feeling guilty myself, I glanced quickly at the name badge on her chest. Nurse Cammy. May I ask you something? I coughed lightly and tried to sound casual. Is Dr. Mickey currently single? The instant she heard that, Nurse Cammy's eyes lit up. She bit her lip, clearly struggling internally. In the end, she didn't dare go against Mickey's wishes and could only answer with disappointment. Miss Jenna, Dr. Mickey seems pretty close to you. Why don't you ask him yourself? I let out a long sigh. Thanks, but I already had. Back then, Mickey calmly finished signing a medical form and replied in an even tone. Jenna, you're my patient. He refused to answer my question. Chapter 3. Mickey said I was lucky. After such a severe car accident, it was a miracle that none of my bones or tendons had been seriously injured. He practically forced me to stay in the hospital for several days, and I was starting to feel unbearably bored. Looking at him pitifully, I asked, Mickey, when can I be discharged? Over the past few days, every nurse who came to change my medication had remained tight-lipped about Mickey's relationship status, terrified that Dr. Mickey might hold them accountable afterward. Based on Mickey's behavior, I already had my suspicions, but without confirmation. The uncertainty was driving me crazy. In the hospital, I was Mickey's patient. There had to be boundaries. Once I got discharged, surely I'd have a chance to get to the bottom of things. Mickey flipped through my test results without even looking up. Jenna, as your attending physician, I must inform you that adequate rest is essential for recovery. Your body needs time to repair damaged tissue and alleviate the effects caused by the accident. His pen moved swiftly across the paperwork as he signed several documents. Before he could finish speaking, a timid voice suddenly came from the doorway. Daddy. A little girl around 5 or 6 years old stood at the entrance of the room, staring at Mickey with wide, round eyes. Her hair was styled into 2 small pigtails, and her features looked remarkably similar to his. I froze. Huh? Holy crap. 6 years had passed. In the memories I had lost, Mickey had actually had a child? When did he get married? Thinking about the timeline, this child should have been born while he was pursuing his doctorate in Manchester. My mind buzzed. Suddenly, all of my behavior over the past few days felt utterly ridiculous. Like a clown making a fool of herself. Mickey had already put down the paperwork. Bending down, he picked up the little girl. His voice softened to an almost unbelievable degree. Daisy, what brings you to the hospital all of a sudden? Where's Aunt Lisa? Didn't she come with you? Daisy was very well behaved. Curled up in Mickey's arms, she answered honestly. I missed Daddy. Aunt Lisa was bringing something for Daddy. So I came with her. She's downstairs putting things away. I ran upstairs by myself first. Only after hearing her explanation did Mickey finally relax. Holding Daisy, he smiled before turning toward me. Daisy, this is Aunt Jenna. Say hello to her. I was so embarrassed that I wanted to disappear beneath the blankets. Mickey, you're married and have a family. Why didn't you say so earlier? You let me get my hopes up for nothing. How could you do this? Looking at Daisy, I felt my ears burn bright red. Faced with such an innocent little girl, I couldn't bring myself to say a word. What was I supposed to tell her? That your father and I were from the same academic program, that I lost my memory in a car accident, and that I thought your dad was single so I was planning to pursue him? I would rather spontaneously combust on the spot. Daisy slid down from Mickey's arms and hurried over to my bedside. Her tiny face was full of concern as she reached out and held my hand. Aunt Jenna, you haven't come to play with me in such a long time. Were you sick? I forced out an awkward laugh. Yeah, I was in a car accident. Wait, huh? I'd met Daisy before? In those 6 years of memories I had lost. What exactly had happened? Mickey looked equally surprised. You two knew each other before? Chapter 4. Mickey was called away by a patient, so Daisy and I sat together on the first floor of the hospital waiting for him. Despite being so young, Daisy was surprisingly mature. After hearing about my car accident, she put on a serious expression and scolded me sternly. Aunt Jenna, how could you be so careless? That was so dangerous. She was only 5 or 6 years old, yet her personality was almost exactly like Mickey's, serious and old-fashioned. Even though I couldn't remember how everything had happened, I still found myself surrendering immediately. I'm sorry, my mistake. I'll definitely watch where I'm going next time. I asked Daisy about how we had met before. At first, she looked surprised. You don't remember? A moment later, understanding dawned on her face. Oh, I get it. You lost your memory. Daisy told me that she wasn't Mickey's biological daughter. She had been adopted by him after the death of his older brother. She was actually his late brother's child. When talking about those painful memories, Daisy remained remarkably calm. When they passed away, Grandma was very sad. But at the time, Daddy was still studying overseas and couldn't take care of things at home. Daisy looked up at me, her eyes sparkling. It was you, Aunt Jenna. Grandma said you helped us a lot. You picked me up from school and took me home. And you also helped Grandma handle all those complicated matters. My heart ached after hearing that. Unable to help myself, I stood up and walked toward a nearby vending machine to buy a bag of candy. But the moment I turned around, someone slammed into me. The person was a tall man, with his head lowered. He looked anxiously at the unconscious girl in his arms as he rushed forward recklessly. Sorry, make way. Caught off guard, I nearly fell to the ground. Daisy immediately jumped down and grabbed hold of me. Aunt Jenna, are you okay? Thank you, Sir. Daisy, I'm perfectly fine. I quickly thanked her before glancing in the direction the man had disappeared. For some reason, his back looked strangely familiar, but I soon shook my head. I didn't know him. It was probably just my imagination. Returning to the bench, I sat down and opened the bag of candy before handing some to Daisy. I'm really sorry. I've forgotten everything that happened in the past. Daisy shook her head generously. It's okay, you're sick. After all, humming a little tune, she unwrapped a piece of candy and was about to put it into her mouth. Suddenly, a little boy ran over and slapped the candy right out of her hand. He was dressed impeccably, and his features were quite handsome, but his behavior was completely unreasonable. Don't eat that. It's mine. Daisy immediately stood up, frowning. What are you doing? Aunt Jenna gave that candy to me. The little boy puffed out his cheeks angrily, glowering at Daisy. He shouted, "You can't eat it! My mommy bought that candy. It's not yours." Still upset, he even deliberately shoved Daisy. Daisy stumbled backward a couple of steps, her face turning bright red with anger. Alarmed, I quickly pulled her into my arms, kneeling down protectively in front of Daisy. I looked at the little boy seriously. "Little guy, you've mistaken me for someone else. I'm not your mother." I wasn't particularly fond of children, but Daisy was different. Knowing what she had gone through in the past, I couldn't help feeling both sympathy and affection for her. As for this rude and overbearing boy, I found myself growing increasingly annoyed. I unwrapped another piece of candy and held it out to Daisy. Smiling gently, I said, "This candy belongs to Daisy, not to you." The little boy stared at me in disbelief. His face crumpled with hurt, as if he might burst into tears at any moment. "Mommy?" His voice trembled. "What are you talking about?" Chapter 5. What kind of problem did this kid have? Randomly calling strangers mom? Looking at him, I repeated myself, "Little guy, you've mistaken me for someone else. I'm not your mother." The moment those words left my mouth, his face suddenly turned bright red with anger. He lunged forward, roughly grabbing at Daisy in my arms and shoving her hard. "Go away! She's my mommy! Go away!" He was so worked up that his voice cracked into a shrill scream. Daisy lost her temper as well. "She is not your mommy. She's my Aunt Jenna. You're the one causing trouble." Watching the boy's unreasonable behavior, a trace of disgust crossed my face. I reached out and grabbed him by the collar. My expression turned cold. "Young man, your behavior right now is extremely rude. I believe you're disturbing us. I want you to apologize to Daisy immediately." At my words, he suddenly froze. Then huge tears began rolling down his cheeks. He let out a heart-wrenching wail. "Why? You are my mommy." The boy's cries echoed throughout the entire hospital lobby. The noisy surroundings fell silent for a moment, unmoved. I kept Daisy protected behind me and stared coldly at the crying child. Suddenly, a tall man pushed through the crowd. His voice carried both anger and reproach. "Jenna, the divorce was between you and me. Was there really any need to take it out on a child?" He bent down and picked up the boy. The way he looked at me was distant and cold. Even making a scene should have its limits. Huh? Who was this guy? He was pretty handsome, but why was everything he said so bizarre? Was he seriously okay? I stood up and suddenly realized he was the same man who had nearly knocked me over earlier while rushing through the hospital. Frowning, I asked, "Are you this child's father?" Instead of getting angry, he laughed. "Jenna, what's the point of asking something like that now?" I nodded. "Given the circumstances, I'll make an exception. Earlier, you were busy taking your loved one to see a doctor, so it's understandable that you couldn't watch your child. I won't hold that against you, but it's a fact that he bullied my child, so I'd like you and your son to apologize." After hearing my words, surprise flashed across his eyes. Then he let out a cold laugh. His words seemed squeezed through clenched teeth, filled with warning and irritation. "Enough already." Elise only fainted from heat exhaustion. I had no choice but to carry her inside for treatment. "How many times do I have to tell you? We're divorced. What exactly are you jealous of?" I was speechless. He was speaking English, right? I recognized every single word, so why couldn't I understand a single sentence he was saying? Tilting my head, I looked at him sincerely. "Sir, psychiatry is on the 3rd floor. Turn left after you get off the elevator. Dr. Noah is excellent. He gave me an evaluation not long ago. As for the apology, let's put that aside for now. How about you go get yourself checked first?" His eyes widened in disbelief. "Jenna, are you sick in the head?" I nodded earnestly. "That's right, sir. I'm currently waiting for an appointment with Dr. Noah myself. I have a psychiatric history. If you push me too far, I might get up in the middle of the night and commit murder." Yet instead of calming down, my words only seemed to make him angrier. A faint fury flickered in his eyes. Suddenly, a hand landed lightly on top of my head, making things up again. "Stop causing trouble." It was Mickey, standing beside me. He calmly extended a hand toward the man. Mr. Song? I'm Mickey, Jenna's attending physician. Chapter 6. We sat in the quiet consultation room, now completely empty. Ethan stared at Mickey, his brows tightly furrowed. You're saying she lost her memory? A moment later, his gaze swept over me before he let out a cold laugh. Or is this some act the two of you came up with together? He paused, his voice hoarse. She was perfectly fine before I left. How could she suddenly get into a car accident? If you're going to make up an excuse, at least make it believable. Eddar's mouth fell open in shock. He hurried over and wrapped his arms around my leg. In a small voice, he said, I'm sorry, Mommy, I didn't know you were sick. He was a perceptive child. It seemed that he had realized I no longer responded to his every demand the way I once had, and that I didn't even remember his existence anymore. The realization had clearly frightened him. Perhaps this was his way of trying to earn my sympathy. But I gently pushed Eddar away and shook my head. I'm sorry, I don't remember you. Even now, I still couldn't believe that I had once been married and had a 5 or 6-year-old child. Besides, from the fragments of gossip I'd overheard from the nurses and everything that had happened today, it wasn't difficult to tell that this father and son had never treated me particularly well. Selective amnesia is usually not caused by direct physical damage to the memory system. Instead, it often results from a psychological defense mechanism triggered by extreme trauma. When a person experiences overwhelming emotional pain, the brain may protect itself by isolating memories associated with intense suffering or fear, either temporarily or permanently. Everything pointed to one obvious conclusion. The 6 years I had forgotten were likely 6 years of unhappiness. I was the kind of person who adapted easily to circumstances. If I already knew that my past relationship with this father and son had been painful, why should I continue entangling myself with them? Sensing my rejection, Eddar froze. His eyes immediately turned red, looking at me almost pleadingly. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Mommy, I'm your favorite baby. Holding Daisy in my arms, I answered honestly. The truth is, I'm not really someone who likes children, and especially not with a personality like yours. I was still upset about how he had bullied Daisy earlier. How had my former self raised a child like this? He was practically a little tyrant. The thought made me silently question my own judgment. After a pause, I continued gently. So far, the only child I like is Daisy. The color drained from Eddar's face. His body trembled uncontrollably. Through sobs, he stammered, I'm sorry. Mommy, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have thrown a tantrum. I shouldn't have tried to take her candy. I just missed you so much. Ethan loved his son deeply. Seeing Eddar cry, he immediately picked him up and shot me a cold glare. Jenna, Eddar is your child too, even if you've lost your memory. Was it really necessary to say something so hurtful to him? Before I could respond, Daisy beat me to it. Throwing her arms around me, she shouted, What gives you the right to say that about Aunt Jenna? You've never treated Aunt Jenna well. Whenever she talked about you, she was never happy. Why don't you think about how badly you've treated her instead? Being publicly criticized by a child left Ethan visibly embarrassed. His expression stiffened. I smiled and gently ruffled Daisy's hair before looking up at Ethan Song. Mr. Song, there's really nothing left to discuss. We're already divorced, and the child is with you. Since that's the case, let's be straightforward about it. How about we never see each other again? Before Ethan could answer, Eddar had already understood enough of the conversation to break down completely. No, I don't want to be separated from Mommy. Ethan's jaw tightened, grinding his teeth. He snapped. Jenna, you. At that moment, a nurse called out from outside. Family members of patient Elise? The patient is awake. Ethan took a deep breath, carrying Eddar in his arms. He pushed open the door and headed out. Before leaving, he threw back one final sentence in a cold voice. Wait until you've calmed down. We'll discuss this again later. The sight of him leaving in such haste looked remarkably like a retreat. Chapter 7. Mickey was busy seeing patients, so he asked a nanny to take Daisy home. He personally escorted me back to my hospital room before turning to leave. I reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his lab coat, looking up at him with sparkling eyes. Mickey, I heard you call me Jenna earlier. I had been holding it in for a while and finally found an opportunity to tease him about it. Mickey paused. He gently removed my hand and tucked it back under the blanket. A faint sigh seemed to escape him. Get some rest. Sensing his attitude, I felt a little disappointed. Oh, I replied gloomily. But the next second, Mickey ruffled my hair. Be good. Once I'm finished with work, I'll arrange your discharge papers. After a brief silence, he asked, Okay? Jenna, Chapter 8. I couldn't wait to be discharged from the hospital. Mickey drove me home and carried my belongings upstairs for me. He wouldn't let me lift a finger. He even brought over a small stool and made me sit by the doorway. I watched as Mickey rolled up his sleeves. Those beautiful hands of Dr. Mickey's, hands that usually held surgical instruments, were now helping me clean my apartment. When he finished tidying up, Mickey carried a bag of trash to the door and glanced down at me. What are you staring at me like that for? I hesitated before speaking softly. Mickey, can you stay tonight? Perhaps my voice was too quiet. Mickey frowned slightly and bent down toward me. What did you say? We've come this far already. We're both adults. What's there to be embarrassed about? Jenna? Mickey was practically right in front of me. An opportunity like this didn't come often. Taking a deep breath, I blurted out with a flushed face. Mickey, I want to sleep with you. The moment the words left my mouth, I didn't dare look at his expression. Instead, I stared nervously at the floor. Silence stretched between us. After a long moment, Mickey tilted his head toward the sofa. Go sit on the couch. I'm taking the trash downstairs. It sounded like an unmistakable rejection. Lowering my head, I silently took a step back. But Mickey's next sentence made my face burn with embarrassment. He said, I'll be back after I buy some condoms. The bathroom was filled with steam, and the sound of running water echoed through the room. Mickey held my waist and pinned me gently against the wall as he kissed me. At the hospital, Dr. Mickey always looked lean beneath his white coat, but when I touched the skin beneath his thin clothing, I could feel the firm strength of his body, warm beneath my fingertips. Tiny droplets of moisture clung to Mickey's long, thick eyelashes. He lifted his gaze slightly, his crystal-like eyes fixed on me with unmistakable intensity. Water trickled down his cheek and landed against my skin. Mickey brushed the droplet away with a kiss before lifting his head to kiss me again. My eyes reddened as I clung to his shoulders. Mickey, I whispered, I don't feel well. The lights outside flickered faintly while water continued to flow nearby. Mickey's throat tightened. His grip on my hand grew firmer. A sheen of sweat appeared along the bridge of his nose. His breath was hot, his voice rough and strained. I'm sorry, Jenna. Just bear with it for a little while. A moment later, a sharp sensation spread through me. My mind went blank for an instant. Mickey. Instinctively, I arched backward, my body taut as a bowstring drawn to its limit. Mickey kissed me again and again, soothingly stroking my back. I'm sorry. I love you. Jenna. Chapter 9. I had a dream. In the dream, I received a phone call from across the ocean. Mickey's voice was calm, as though he were merely stating a fact. Jenna, I got a girlfriend at school. In truth, he was a terrible liar. But in that instant, I understood exactly what he was trying to say. It felt as though a hollow bell had been struck inside my chest. My voice grew quiet. Congratulations, Mickey. I sniffled. There was nothing I could do. His rejection was already that straightforward. I couldn't exactly keep chasing after him and refused to let go. I thought that perhaps my fate with Mickey had simply been too shallow. Perhaps this was where it ended. Later, I bought a bouquet of flowers. On my way back from the cemetery, a speeding Maserati struck me and sent me flying. Broken glass scattered everywhere. The driver fled the scene. A kind passerby who arrived afterward took me to the hospital. That person was Ethan. He apologized and told me that there were no surveillance cameras near the cemetery, making it impossible to identify the hit-and-run vehicle, but he promised that he would take care of me until I recovered. Ethan Song was handsome and distinguished, the eldest son of the Song family. He cared for me with meticulous attention, even after the doctor's diagnosis came back. The glass shards had sliced through my wrist, damaging the tendons. I would never be able to hold a surgical scalpel again. It was Ethan who stayed by my side. He pulled me into his arms and gently patted my head. It's okay. You'll get better. Perhaps it was the suspension bridge effect brought on by the trauma of a near-death experience. Or perhaps it was transference. At the lowest point of my life, I met Ethan, and I fell hopelessly in love with him. Ethan had originally rejected me, but on the day I was discharged from the hospital, he received a phone call. When he came to find me afterward, he was already drunk. Those bloodshot eyes stared at me for a long time. Then he leaned in and kissed me. "Jenna, marry me." That was an extraordinarily chaotic night. Ethan held me in his arms, yet the name he called was someone else's. Later, I learned that Ethan had a childhood sweetheart named Elise, someone with whom he had spent years in an endless cycle of pursuit and avoidance. Because of an unexpected pregnancy, our wedding was rushed. But the Song family never liked me. Not long after I gave birth to Eder, they used my poor health as an excuse to take him away from me. And Ethan finally realized just how irrational he had been, how insane his decisions had been. He began doing everything he could to distance himself from me. So when the Song family took Eder away, Ethan didn't object. He merely said one word: "Fine." From that moment on, my suspension bridge collapsed completely. Chapter 10. When I woke up, Mickey was holding me gently in his arms. I opened my eyes and found tears rolling down my cheeks. "Mickey, I had a nightmare." Mickey lowered his head and kissed away my tears. His voice was soft. "Did it hurt that much?" I stared at the ceiling for a moment before shaking my head. "I forgot." Curling up against his chest, I clutched the hem of his shirt tightly. In a quiet voice, I asked, "Mickey, did you date anyone during those 6 years?" Mickey froze briefly. He pressed a kiss to the tip of my nose. After a pause, he answered honestly, "No. Back then, our supervisor was extremely demanding. Every day, I worried about whether I would even graduate. Something happened at home, but I couldn't even scrape together enough money to buy a plane ticket back to the country. I was lost back then, completely uncertain about the future. I was already in such terrible circumstances. I didn't dare drag anyone else into it. Perhaps those painful and humiliating memories had already become part of the past. That was why Mickey could speak of them so calmly now. I rested my forehead against his chest. My tears soaked into his shirt, leaving a damp stain. I thought, Mickey's years in Manchester must have been very difficult. Difficult enough to wear down a once spirited and confident young man until all his sharp edges were gone. Even when rejecting someone, he couldn't bear to do it directly. Instead, he had to invent a gentle excuse. Fate was truly cruel. An invisible hand had violently torn our lives off course, dragging us into the chaos of the world and grinding us down until we were covered in wounds. The arrogance and recklessness of youth had ultimately become the regrets and scars of our lives. And in the end, all that remained was a light sigh. We were simply not meant to be. Not meant to be. Not meant to be. To hell with not meant to be. I grabbed Mickey by the collar and forced him to lower his head. Then I kissed him fiercely. I bit his lip and nipped at his jaw. Mickey looked surprised. His lip split slightly, drawing blood, but he didn't resist. Instead, he indulged me, allowing me to gnaw at him like a frantic little animal, sitting on his lap. I clenched his collar and declared angrily, "Mickey, you're not allowed to run away again. Do you hear me?" Mickey looked at me, his gaze softened, tilting his head up. He kissed me gently. There was laughter hidden in his voice as he replied, "As you command, Ms. Jenna." Chapter 11. Mickey took an extended leave from the hospital. The two of us spent nearly every day together, inseparable. It felt as though we were trying to make up for the 6 years we had lost. Mickey was no longer a reckless young man, yet after finally being with the person he loved, he found it impossible to get enough of it. At his core, he was an extraordinarily gentle person, but at certain moments, he became surprisingly firm and possessive, holding me close and refusing to let me pull away. When I became overwhelmed, my eyes reddened, and I found myself pecking at his lips as I pleaded softly, "Mickey, be gentler." Mickey wrapped his arms around me and coaxed me in a tender voice, yet he showed no intention of letting me go. When he spoke, I could feel the vibration of his chest, sending a tingling sensation through me from head to toe. "Jenna, be good. You're doing great. Sweetheart, you can handle this, can't you?" A whimper escaped my lips. My thoughts dissolved into a muddled haze. Mickey. My head tilted back instinctively, exposing my slender neck. Mickey lowered his head and pressed a kiss there. He held me tightly, refusing to let go. My breathing became uneven. Everything before my eyes blurred for a moment. In that hazy state, I felt Mickey brush a kiss against my lips and whisper softly, "Jenna, don't leave me." Somewhere in my sleep, I vaguely heard a phone ringing. Mickey gently patted my head before answering it. On the other end of the line came the butler's helpless voice. He explained that the young master had been crying and insisting on seeing his mother. After a pause, the butler sounded hesitant. "Madam, when do you plan on coming home?" Mickey let out an absent-minded chuckle. "Sorry, she's asleep." There was a sudden crash from the other end of the line, followed by a burst of commotion. Then someone else quickly took the phone. It was Ethan. His voice sounded as though he were suppressing his anger. "Dr. Mickey, thank you for taking care of her during this time. I'll come pick her up right now." Mickey interlaced his fingers with mine, lowering his head. He kissed away the tears lingering on my eyelashes and gave a soft laugh. "There's no need. She cried pretty hard just now. It took me a long time to calm her down. She only just fell asleep." With that, he ignored whatever reaction came from the other end, hung up the call, and switched off the phone. Still half asleep, I wrapped my arms around Mickey's waist and murmured, "Whose call was that?" Mickey kissed the tip of my nose. "No one important. Go back to sleep." Chapter 12. It wasn't until the next day, after turning my phone back on, that I saw the countless missed calls. The moment I opened the door, I found Eder crouching outside, clutching a stuffed toy. His eyes were swollen red from crying. The second he saw me, his face lit up with joy, and he threw himself toward me. "Mommy!" In my recovered memories, he had been raised by the Song family from a young age and had never liked me very much as his biological mother. We rarely saw each other, and whenever we did, he treated me impatiently, ordering me around with a sense of superiority. The truth was, he had never liked me. Otherwise, after Ethan and I divorced, why would he have deliberately said, "Humph, I hate you. I want Aunt Eli to be my mommy instead"? He should have liked Elise. After all, he had happily followed Elise and Ethan around the world. My feelings toward Eder were calm now. The reason I had been annoyed before was because of how rudely he treated Daisy. Later, he had admitted his mistake and apologized. There was no reason for me to keep being angry with him. I crouched down and gently patted his head. "Why are you here all by yourself? Where's your father?" Eder looked almost overwhelmed by my gentleness. Lifting his tear-streaked face, he answered timidly, "Daddy is parking downstairs." I ran up by myself first. I spoke softly. "Tell him he doesn't need to come upstairs. Elise is being discharged today. He should take you to the hospital and pick up your Aunt Eli." Eder's face instantly turned pale. His eyes reddened again. I don't want Aunt Eli to be my mommy. I only want you, Mommy." At that moment, Ethan arrived at the doorway. Hearing those words, he stopped in the corridor and looked at me. He closed his eyes tightly for a moment. "Jenna, I'm sorry. There's really nothing between Elise and me. We're only business partners now. We were actually on our way to visit you that day, but Elise suddenly suffered heat stroke. I had no choice but to take her to a doctor first. And Eder only sees Elise as a kind aunt. He won't have a new mother." After a pause, Ethan took a few steps toward me, pressing his lips together. He hesitated before speaking. "Eder depends on you a lot. He can't live without you. Would you consider moving back home?" I looked at Ethan and shook my head. "I'm sorry. To me, the two of you are strangers. What you're suggesting is completely inappropriate." Ethan froze. He had assumed everything was already settled. Yet he had forgotten one simple fact. To me, they were people with whom I no longer shared any connection. I looked at him coldly. "Mr. Song, please leave. Jenna is my partner. Inviting her to live in your home when you have no relationship with her whatsoever is rather inappropriate. Don't you think, Mr. Song?" Mickey stepped out from behind me, fully dressed and composed. Lowering his head, he pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. Then he turned to Ethan with perfect courtesy. "Mr. Song, I'm heading to the hospital. Would you like a ride?" Ethan's expression immediately darkened. His jaw tightened. His fists clenched. You. But the next second, he remembered that Eder was still standing there. Taking a deep breath, Ethan swallowed the rest of his words. He bent down, picked up Eder, and left without another word. Eder continued crying and struggling. "Mommy! I want mommy!" His voice cracked from screaming. The apartment building was old, and the soundproofing between floors was poor. I heard Ethan carrying Eder downstairs and placing him into the car. Then his calm, emotionless voice drifted upward. "Let's go home. Your mother doesn't need us." Chapter 13. Because my memories were returning unevenly, Mickey scheduled another appointment with Dr. Noah for a follow-up examination. After getting my queue number, I sat waiting for my turn. Then I saw a woman wearing light makeup and stylish clothes walking toward me in high heels. She pulled the medical file from my hands, glanced at it, and raised an eyebrow. "It's just a few minor aches and pains. Is there really any need to come to the hospital?" Or, she deliberately dragged out her words, her tone dripping with disdain. "Are you putting on this whole performance for someone's benefit?" I smiled and took my file back. "My body belongs to me, so naturally I care about it. Unlike you, Elise, you come running to the hospital whether you're sick or not. Aren't you worried about picking up an illness while you're here?" Elise frowned. She glared at me. "Who are you cursing?" I fell silent for a moment before wiping at my face. "Elise." Some saliva. Elise seemed completely thrown off by my unexpected response. She froze briefly. A moment later, she sneered. "So you really are pretending to be sick. Ethan said you'd lost your memory and forgotten the past 6 years. But it seems your memory is working just fine. You still recognize me, don't you?" I sighed and pointed to my head. "The doctor said my brain wasn't damaged. It's only temporary amnesia, and even if my memories returned, my life is simple enough. If a strange woman suddenly comes looking for trouble, do you really think I wouldn't be able to figure out who she is? Besides," I sighed again, "I saw your face the day you pretended to have heat stroke and checked yourself into the hospital." Elisa's face alternated between green and white. Lowering her voice, she spoke angrily. "What exactly are you trying to do?" Ethan and I were finally getting closer again, and suddenly he cuts off all contact with me. "And even Eder, that little ingrate." She took a deep breath. "I treated him so well, yet he refuses to see me, saying I'm a bad woman and that I'm vicious." Elisa's voice filled with resentment. "What did I even do wrong? Wasn't what I did enough?" By the end, she was visibly agitated. "If only that car had killed you back then." "Elise." A sharp voice interrupted her. Someone strode over and shoved Elise aside. It was Ethan. He looked at her coldly. "What are you doing here?" Eder, who seemed inseparable from Ethan these days, came toddling into the hallway behind him. He glanced at me timidly, too afraid to approach, yet unable to suppress the desire to be close to me. Step by step, he shuffled toward me while watching my expression carefully. In a tiny voice, he said, "Mommy." After being pushed by Ethan, Elise nearly crashed into the wall. She let out a harsh laugh. "Ethan, are you really still trying to hide this? You think you're some kind of good person? You lied to Jenna for 6 years and married her. Have you never felt guilty about it?" I could tell this argument wasn't appropriate for a child to witness, so I crouched down and covered Eder's eyes and ears with my hands. Ethan shot me a quick glance. He clearly wanted Elise to stop talking, but Elise stepped backward, avoiding him, with a bitter laugh. She spoke bluntly. "The person who hit Jenna outside the cemetery, the person who made her unable to hold a surgical scalpel ever again, wasn't that you, Ethan?" Instantly, Ethan froze. The color drained from his face. He looked at me in panic and forced out an ugly smile. "Jenna, you." I sighed. "I'm not an idiot. I figured it out." Chapter 14. 6 years ago, Ethan and Elise were deeply in love. The day I went to the cemetery was the anniversary of my parents' deaths. The sun was blazing overhead, hot enough to make anyone dizzy. Perhaps that was why Ethan, blinded by anger and the scorching sunlight, failed to notice someone standing by the roadside. At first, he told me that there were no surveillance cameras near the cemetery. They had been unable to identify the hit-and-run driver. The truth was that he and Elise were about to leave the country together. He concealed the incident because he didn't want to become entangled in any legal consequences. What he never expected was that I would lose the ability to hold a surgical scalpel. My entire career was destroyed because of a momentary lapse of judgment from a privileged young master. The reason Ethan had cared for me so attentively in the hospital was because he felt guilty. But Ethan, after we got married, after sharing the same bed day after day and night after night, was there really never a single moment when you felt ashamed? Perhaps I was foolish too. It wasn't until Elise returned to the country that I finally realized the truth. But after 6 years of suffering, my heart had already been worn into pieces by Ethan. When the lifeline you cling to, the only salvation in your life, turns out to be the very thing that destroyed you. After 6 years of entanglement, love and hatred become impossible to separate. And when that happens, it becomes incredibly difficult to gather the courage to pull back the curtain and expose the ugly truth. So when Ethan finally changed his mind and proposed a divorce, I actually felt relieved. As it happened, Eder had been crying and throwing a tantrum because I told him not to eat too much candy. He shoved me angrily and shouted that he hated me, that I was a vicious mother, that no wonder Daddy didn't like me. I lowered my eyes and looked at Eder. After a long moment of silence, I smiled softly at Ethan. Okay, let's get divorced. Chapter 15. Ethan was the eldest son of the Song family, a man who had always stood in the spotlight. Yet at that moment, his back seemed to bend under an invisible weight. He looked exhausted and miserable. The veins on his forehead throbbed. His chest rose and fell unevenly. His voice was hoarse and dry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them again, they were bloodshot. I was too young back then, too arrogant. I never imagined things would end up like this. I wronged you, Jenna. He looked at me almost pleadingly, as though hoping for forgiveness. Tilting my head, I looked at the broken man before me and asked in confusion, if you're apologizing, why didn't you do it sooner? Now I've forgotten everything. So what's the point of your apology? The moment he heard my answer, Ethan staggered. He looked like a dying man, bent over, covering his mouth, coughing repeatedly. I ignored him, gently pushing Eder toward him. I stood up without another word. At that moment, Mickey was coming downstairs. He had come to take me to see Dr. Noah. Walking up to him, I smiled brightly. Mickey, did you come downstairs just to pick me up? Mickey's gaze briefly swept past the people behind me. Then he reached out and gently ruffled my hair. His voice was warm and gentle. Yes, I missed you. Even half a day apart felt too long. Chapter 16. Perhaps because a long-cherished wish had finally come true, the Mickey I had yearned for and never been able to have was finally by my side. As a result, the psychological defenses I had built over the years gradually dissolved. A year after losing my memory, I slowly recovered every piece of the past buried deep within my mind. But no matter what, after everything I had gone through, those painful memories no longer had the power to shake me. On the day Dr. Noah declared me fully recovered, she stepped forward and wrapped me in a warm hug. Jenna, you need to remember this. You don't need to depend on anyone, and you don't need to transfer your feelings onto someone else. You will always have the right to live as an independent person. Relieved, I stood and hugged her back. Thank you for all your help during this past year of therapy. Mickey had originally been waiting outside the consultation room, but he had been stopped midway by a patient and ended up staying in a ward. He sent me a message telling me to wait for him in his office after I finished. The moment I stepped out of the consultation room, I saw two familiar figures crouching by the doorway, a father and son. They looked almost like they had been made from the same mold, both exceptionally handsome. Even passers-by couldn't help glancing at them. Ethan awkwardly straightened up. Jenna, how have you been? Eder was dressed formally today. His hair had clearly been styled with care. He looked adorable and impeccably put together. Over the past year, Eder had frequently sneaked away to see me, but every time, I had politely sent him back to the Song family, citing the fact that I couldn't really remember much. Now that he had heard my therapy was finally complete, the father and son had appeared at the hospital once again. Eder jumped down from the bench and hurried over to me, tilting his head back. He asked hopefully, Mommy, did your memory come back? Do you remember me? I lowered my eyes to look at him and nodded. Yes, I remember. Eder looked incredibly nervous. His voice trembled. Mommy, I missed you so much. After hearing my answer, Ethan stepped forward, standing before me. He hesitated for a long moment. Jenna, I'm sorry about everything that happened before. He didn't specify what he meant. Perhaps he was apologizing for all of it, for everything in the past. He looked genuinely remorseful, his deep eyes fixed on me. Eder loves you very much as his mother, and I love you too. Jenna, would you consider marrying me again? Chapter 17. I had heard bits and pieces about what happened over the past year. Ethan and Elise had fallen out completely. The image of his once perfect goddess had shattered beyond repair. Women continued to circle around Ethan, hoping to become Mrs. Song. Yet he remained single. I laughed. Ethan, don't tell me you're regretting everything now. Ethan's eyes trembled. He lowered his head awkwardly. I've always regretted it, but you couldn't remember the past. I didn't dare push you too hard. That was true. Over the past year, I had used I don't remember as an excuse to turn away the father and son countless times. I regret something too. I just never had the chance to say it before. I took 2 steps back and looked at Ethan. Then I smiled mockingly. Ethan, you're a terrible person. The thing I regret most in my entire life is meeting you. The old Jenna had treated Ethan like a suspension bridge hanging over a cliff. She had clung to him desperately, refusing to let go. Now, I understood something. No matter who you project your hopes onto, no one can save you. Not Ethan, not even Mickey. After everything that had happened, I finally realized, even if you fall to the bottom of a canyon, you can still climb back up with your own hands. There's no need to cling desperately to the last strand of wire. And because I finally understood that, I could say these words without hesitation. I've been accepted into a graduate medical research program at Karolinska. I'll be starting next month. I had already discussed it with Mickey. He said he and Daisy would wait for me. Whenever he had time, he would bring Daisy to Sweden to visit me. Then I gave Ethan my final answer. From now on, please never appear in front of me again. I smiled apologetically at Eder and gently ruffled his hair. You'll find someone who'll be a better mother than I ever was. And now, let's say goodbye properly. Eder, I wish you a wonderful future. Ethan's face turned deathly pale. He lowered his head, making it impossible to see his expression. I'm sorry. Sorry that your life had gone so smoothly until you met someone as terrible as me. Congratulations. Congratulations on finally getting what you wanted. On being free to spread your wings and fly. I nodded politely. Then, one finger at a time, I pried Eder's hand away from the corner of my clothing. Goodbye. I walked down the hospital corridor. Out of the corner of my eye, I could still see Ethan standing where he was. One hand covered his eyes. His figure looked lonely and desolate. A child's grief is often purer and more honest than an adult's. Watching me leave, Eder stumbled after me. He tried desperately to run in my direction, but the hospital was crowded. He bumped into people and fell several times. In the end, he collapsed onto the floor and burst into heartbreaking sobs. Mommy! I want Mommy! But I never looked back. Chapter 18. I walked toward the exit. Mickey was waiting for me at the end of the corridor. I took his hand and smiled. Mickey, it's been a long time. Together, we stepped out of the hospital. The sky was clear. A gentle breeze drifted through the air. The weather was beautiful.